Okay, so let's jump into the next thing, which is I want to talk about this separately, which Russia was kicked out of SWIFT, which is the SWIFT network, is how we do international transfers of money. So when banks want to do stuff, we talked about how the Bitcoin kind of plans this, which is some point we'll get to. But fundamentally, I think what I really want to talk about is the implications of this. I think it may be that we accidentally killed the petrodollar system and the sovereign debt market overnight. And I guess I want to know what you think, Luke.
I'm not sure exactly what you mean on that and how they necessarily would have done that. I think I know what you mean, but why don't you explain a little bit more?
Okay. So fundamentally, the sovereign debt market is about, so you own each other's debt, right? So you own the other country's debt. By cutting down the SWIFT overnight, you said, I will never pay you the interest, the money and the interest I owe you on my own debt, on this country's debt. So Russia owns U.S. debt, they own other people's debt, and now they can't get access to the payments. We've rendered the sovereign debt that they own to zero effectively overnight. Relatedly, we have thrown Russia into China's hands now. They are now fully together because their only real source of money will be through China, selling them both wheat, which they've agreed to, China's agreed to buy in CNY, and selling them oil, and again in CNY. So they're going to start selling tons of oil and wheat all to China in China's home currency. So we've now got the China, what I call the Chinese yen dollar system. The Chinese petro yen system, I guess is what you call it, right? The petro Chinese yen system, going along with the fact that the sovereign debt market was killed overnight, because every other country is looking around and going, well, if I do anything you ever dislike, and it may not be an invasion of a country, then you can just cut me off with the international system altogether, and all that debt that I've taken on is rendered to zero. So why would you ever buy another country's debt, knowing that they have the control, the ability to just cut you off altogether? You spent money on bonds you expected to get money back on, and now you can't even get it. And so effectively, I think we've hit whether we meant to or not, and we did this so quickly, I don't think there was much thought into it. We have killed the dollar as the reserve currency, at least at the start, because it used to be the dollar plus the U.S. Treasury bond were kind of the reserve currency, or acting as reserve currency together. And now it's gone. So I don't see how we haven't just killed our reserve currency status, and I don't see how it doesn't play out, other than we have killed it. And if I don't know how long this was going to take, but I do think we're going to see competing East versus West here. So you're going to have the Russia and China and whatever their monetary system kind of fighting our euro and dollar system. But the euro and the dollar are not backed by much of anything, whereas the Russian Chinese yen one will be backed by oil. So I guess I just see this as really, really problematic. Anyway, Luke, what are your thoughts based on what I'm saying?
That's a very compelling argument that you make. I'm trying to find a counter argument. The only one I can really come up with is this is such an extreme case that I don't think in general it would ever have. I mean, Germany didn't want to even do this, and maybe it's because they understood this would happen. This seems so extreme that I don't know if that really comes into play, but at the same time,
what do you mean by
the fact that you can get?
I think the event happened.
Because most countries aren't. Yeah, no. I just mean I don't think most countries, right, are ever going to do anything to get kicked out of the SWIFT system. Even if they invade other countries, it doesn't really happen. But you make a compelling argument where if you do have a lot of if you have a lot of debt, you could just get rid of it by getting kicked out of the SWIFT system, or maybe even removing yourself from the SWIFT system. You know what I mean? Now it might have lit some light bulbs up in people and go, oh.
I mean, that adds a second complication to it. Was this intentional?
Yeah.
Was this part of the plan altogether? Or at least to the level of because here's the thing: we've now forced they forced a reset on the system on us, whether we like it or not. If the petrodollar system fails, you have to replace it with something, and I don't see how it didn't just end. And as a result, and it's not going to, not replacing it tomorrow, but it's going to be forced to replace in the next few years, and they're in a position to finally do this because China became the world's biggest exporter, unlike us, in the last 20 years. So we used to be the biggest one. They are now the biggest exporter. They have all of our factories. And Russia is the largest energy exporter. And again, what matters more? Is it the U.S. dollar, money that can be printed out of thin air? Or is it the physical thing that lights the homes, the things that move aircraft carriers, the things that move your cars? I think it's the thing that
That's
does
not
all
these
that.
aircraft carriers. Those
Wait, is aircraft? Are they nuclear subs? Are they nuclear powered?
Yeah.
Okay.
They're
Well,
nuclear powered.
most of the Department of Defense is the largest consumer of oil in the world. That much I can tell you.
Yeah. I think this is maybe where we differ a little bit because I believe that over the next 30 to 50 years, renewables and nuclear, maybe not nuclear because it takes 20 years to build a plant, but I think renewables are going to happen a lot more and more. And I think a big part
But
of
great, that's
actually
20 or
why-
30 year problem. This is a 5-year problem.
Yeah. I don't
problem is
see. There's too many things that would have to happen for me to believe that like this. It's a big move, but it's one domino. But there's like a row instead of like just one column. There's like a row of other dominoes.
I agree
think
with
would have to fall
I
for
agree with that, but I thought this was going to play out over 10 to 20 years, and I think we did it to ourselves. Like this is the thing. They got us to do it to ourselves, and I think we have accelerated the timeline from what would have been 10 to 20 years with any luck now to 5. Like we ended it on our own, and every small country out there, like El Salvador, which already was kind of anyway, it was like we need to get out of the SWIFT system. Like there's no way. We need to be able to be reliant if we're ever kicked out. Like that's the thing. So how do we do that? First of all, we stop taking debt. I'm not going to buy their debt. I'll buy other things. I'll find gold or some people might buy Bitcoin. They may even buy USD Tether, right? They might pay a USD cryptocurrency they can trade, right? They're not going to buy treasury bonds. And that will be one thing that I think a lot of countries, as a consequence of this. And again, I think fundamentally people have to ask the question, which is more valuable, oil or dollars? I don't think it's dollars. I think as a practical matter, I think it's actually the oil. We just haven't accepted this.
In general, yeah, you're right. But my counterpoint would be that the reason all of these countries in the world use U.S. dollars and buy bonds isn't because it had a competitive advantage to go that way. It's because we would assassinate their leaders if they didn't do it. And so
Correct.
that's kind of how this all happened. And so why
But
that threat doesn't necessarily go away.
No, that does go away because the difference was, and it's the best argument I think you've given. They've done it to Gaddafi. We did it to Hussein. We've done it multiple times every time they tried to exit the petrodollar system, right? But Russia is a nuclear country, and whether or not Putin's there, they're moving off of it. So I think we can get rid of Putin possibly, but it doesn't mean we get rid of the Russian threat. China, also a nuclear thing, with also the world's manufacturing plant, including ours. They have a lot more leverage than any of these small guys ever did. Saudi Arabia couldn't have done this. I agree with that. But Russia can, especially when it's got help from China, and China could do. They had to be working together. Or let's put it the way: Russia does not go into Ukraine without China at least saying, "If you do it, we won't care." And they have been silent on this. They have been entirely silent on Russia's invasion of Ukraine. He knew ahead of time. Putin knew ahead of time he could do this, and Xi Jinping didn't care. Or maybe even said, "Go ahead and do it. Let's create the chaos. Let's create the chaos we need to reset the system, because we're getting fucked and we're tired of it."
That sounds like 70 chess to me.
So
it was a little hard for me to buy.
What I actually think is more likely, I think some people have offered it. Luke Roman offered it, and I think it's worth listening to his interview with. It just came out. But I was thinking about it as well what Bitcoin did, which is really a subset of the Investor Podcast. But with that being said, I disagree with him a little bit. I don't think it was necessarily intended to happen, but I do think they prepared for it. And they assumed if it wasn't this thing, it would be another thing. And if it wasn't this thing, it would be another thing. they had to plan ahead of time in case this is the outcome they got. If they got bloodied. So, for instance, let's imagine Russia had won through Ukraine immediately, and we never responded by kicking them off the SWIFT. I think they were prepared to do that and to handle that and wait for another time to do this. But I also think they were ready to go on this time rather than that later time. So I think it's sort of like, I sort of think it's like they didn't really care if this was the time or if it was another event. But I think they were ready for it. And they were just like, let's create. I think if it wasn't this event, they were going to create another event until eventually. Because here's the thing: they get possible deniability right now. They get to say, "Hey, we aren't the ones who killed the dollar. You're the ones who killed the dollar. You did it. You did it overnight. That was your doing, not us. We used to trust that you'd pay us, but now you said you won't pay us. That's what you said. The minute you kick us out of the SWIFT system, you guaranteed you'll never pay us. That's your fault, not ours."
Yeah. If you're having this idea, I gotta believe that they like that idea's in the zeitgeist. So they probably had that idea as well. So I could see that maybe this wasn't necessarily the outcome. Some dude might have raised his hand in some meeting and said this could happen. They'd be like, okay, we'll keep that in mind just in case. Let's prepare for it. And then it happened. They might be like, holy cow, that was. I think that was part of
the deal when the deal to buy oil from Russia and CNY had already happened. The deal to buy wheat had already happened. So they were already setting up the. I mean, they could have just done this anyway, right? But I also think they were thinking, whenever we do finally get into conflict with the West, and it's guaranteed that we do, because we have irreconcilable differences about how we see the world, we need to be ready for this event. And I don't think you go into Ukraine. I don't think you let Putin go into Ukraine if you're Xi Jinping, unless you feel like we're on solid enough ground that we can handle this if these events happen, right? That's the kind of thinking I think they had. And we're on solid enough ground, and at some point this conversation is going to come, and we're ready, and the difference is we're ready, and we see it, and they don't. We're still worrying about, we're arguing about some of the dumbest shit in the world right now here in the U.S. We don't have a fucking clue what's going on. And I think they got our number, and that's really useful for them. Like, we can't even agree that the last guy, that the insurrection was an insurrection. We can't agree that last guy sucking up to Putin was sucking up to Putin, and that's bad, right? There's things, we are at our own throat. This is the perfect time to do this, but the best way to do it is to do it in a way that they don't get blamed for it. The only thing they're blamed for is invading Ukraine, but killing the dollar system was actually on us. It was a choice we made in response.
That one's hard. I'm gonna have to stand by and watch that. That's a big deal. I don't think